The last time I saw my grandson, he was standing behind my daughter's front door with tears in his eyes, holding the birthday gift I had brought him. Before he could run to me, my daughter stepped in front of him and said, "You need to leave Mom. You're not seeing Ethan anymore." I stood frozen on that porch. What made it worse was knowing that while she was shutting me out of her life, I was still paying for her mortgage, her son's private school, and half the bills in that house. That night, I went home, opened my laptop, and made one decision that changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story touches your heart, please like and subscribe. And tell me honestly, what would you have done if your own child refused to let you see your grandchild while still depending on your support? I read every comment, and I always enjoy seeing where everyone is watching from. Let me know your city, your state, and what time it is where you are right now. My name is Katrina Rhodes, and for most of my life, being a mother was the role I loved more than any other. I am 67 years old now, and when I look back on the decades behind me, I don't remember the promotions I earned, the awards I received, or even the vacations I took. What I remember are the sacrifices. I remember the nights I stayed awake worrying about my daughter. I remember the second job I worked when money was tight. I remember eating canned soup for a week so Madison could have the dress she wanted for her high school graduation. And if I'm being honest, I would have done it all again. Madison was my only child. The day she was born, I felt as though my entire purpose in life had finally arrived. Her father, Michael Rhodes, and I were not wealthy people. We built our life slowly and carefully in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. Michael worked as an accountant, and I spent nearly 30 years as an office manager for an insurance company. We weren't rich, but we were responsible. We saved. We planned. We made sure Madison had opportunities we never had. When she was little, she had a smile that could melt any frustration I felt. If I had a terrible day at work, all it took was one hug from her to make everything feel better. She was smart, ambitious, and full of dreams. Michael used to say, "That girl is going to change the world someday." I believed him. For many years, it felt like our family was exactly what families were supposed to be. Then life changed. 6 years ago, my husband died unexpectedly from a heart attack. One moment, he was sitting beside me on our porch drinking coffee and talking about retirement. The next moment, he was gone. There are losses that leave scars. Then there are losses that leave craters. Michael's death left a crater. For months afterward, I walked through my house feeling as though part of me had disappeared. His favorite chair sat empty. His coffee mug remained in the cabinet. His tools stayed exactly where he had left them. Every corner of the house reminded me of him. The loneliness was overwhelming. Madison was already married by then. She and her husband, Brandon Parker, lived about 40 minutes away. They had recently welcomed their son, Ethan. During those dark months after Michael died, Ethan became the light that helped me keep going. He was only 2 years old at the time. Whenever he ran into my arms and shouted, "Grandma Cat," I felt alive again. I started spending more time with them. At first, it felt natural. Madison was adjusting to motherhood. Brandon worked long hours. I wanted to help. I genuinely enjoyed helping. I babysat whenever they needed me. I picked Ethan up from daycare. I cooked meals and brought them over. I folded laundry. I stocked their refrigerator. None of it felt like a burden. It felt like love. Then the financial support began. At first, it was small. Madison mentioned that daycare costs were higher than expected. I offered to help. A few months later, Brandon lost a bonus he had been expecting at work. I wrote them a check. Then their water heater failed. Then their car needed repairs. Then Ethan needed braces earlier than expected. Every time there was a problem, I stepped in. Every single time. I never kept score. That was my first mistake. When Michael died, I inherited our savings retirement accounts and life insurance benefits. We had spent decades building financial security. I wasn't wealthy enough to own private jets or vacation homes, but I was comfortable enough to help my daughter. And that's exactly what I did. Over time, helping became a habit. A very expensive habit. If Madison called, I answered. If she needed something, I provided it. When she and Brandon wanted to move into a larger house, I contributed toward the down payment. When Ethan started private elementary school, I volunteered to help cover tuition. When unexpected expenses appeared, I quietly handled them. The truth is, I enjoyed feeling needed. After losing Michael, I was terrified of losing my place in the family. Helping made me feel connected. Helping made me feel important. Helping made me feel loved. At least that's what I told myself. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs. But at the time, I ignored them. Whenever Madison called, our conversations seemed shorter than they used to be. She rarely asked how I was doing. She rarely asked whether I felt lonely. Most conversations revolved around schedules, bills, school events, or problems that needed solving. I noticed it, but I made excuses. She's busy. She's raising a child. She's stressed. I told myself those things over and over again. The alternative was too painful to consider. Then there was Brandon. I never fully trusted him. He was charming when he wanted something, polite when other people were watching, but there was always something underneath the surface that bothered me. Sometimes he made jokes that didn't feel like jokes, comments about my age, comments about how different generations didn't understand modern life, comments about how families should be independent. Oddly enough, those comments usually appeared right after I had helped them financially. Still, I stayed quiet. For Madison's sake, for Ethan's sake, especially for Ethan. That little boy became the center of my world. Every Friday evening, he would spend the night at my house. We baked cookies together. We planted flowers in the backyard. We watched old animated movies while wrapped in blankets. He would sit beside me and ask endless questions about everything. Why do birds fly south? Why is the sky blue? Why do grandparents get wrinkles? He made me laugh in ways I hadn't laughed since Michael died. And during those moments, I truly believed everything was fine. I believed our family was strong. I believed my daughter appreciated me. I believed all the sacrifices meant something. What I didn't realize was that beneath the surface, things were already changing. Slowly, quietly, dangerously. And by the time I finally understood what was happening, the daughter I thought I knew would be standing in front of her house, looking me in the eyes and telling me I was no longer welcome in her son's life. I just didn't know it yet. The first time I realized something had changed in my daughter wasn't during an argument. It wasn't during a family gathering. It wasn't even something she said. It was something she stopped saying. Thank you. That may sound insignificant, but when you spend your life helping someone, you notice the difference between gratitude and expectation. For years, Madison had always thanked me, not because I demanded it, not because I needed praise, but because appreciation came naturally to her. At least it used to. Somewhere along the way, that changed. And if I'm being honest, I think it started shortly after Brandon received a promotion at work. Suddenly, appearances became very important to them. They began spending money differently. They traded their practical sedan for a luxury SUV. They upgraded their furniture. They joined an expensive country club. Their social media accounts became filled with pictures of expensive restaurants, weekend trips, and carefully staged family photos. Every picture looked perfect. Every smile looked perfect. Every caption talked about blessings and success, but something about it felt forced. I remember sitting in my living room one evening, scrolling through photos Madison had posted online. There she was, standing beside Brandon in front of a beautiful new vehicle. There was Ethan smiling in designer clothes. There were expensive dinners, luxury vacations, perfect family moments. Then I looked around my own house, the same furniture Michael and I had purchased years earlier, The same curtains, the same dining table, the same quiet rooms. And for the first time, I found myself wondering how much of that lifestyle was actually theirs, because I knew something most people didn't. I was paying for part of it, not directly, not publicly, but consistently. A few weeks later, Madison called. "Katrina, can I ask you something?" Whenever she called me Katrina instead of Mom, it usually meant money was involved. "Of course," she sighed dramatically. "Ethan's school tuition is increasing again." I waited. "We're just stretched really thin right now." That phrase had become familiar. Stretched really thin? Somehow they always seemed stretched thin while eating at restaurants I couldn't afford myself. "How much do you need?" I asked. There was a brief silence. Then she gave me the number. I transferred the money the same afternoon. No questions asked. No conditions attached. Just like always. A few days later, I visited their house. The moment I walked inside, I noticed several large shopping bags sitting near the staircase. Designer labels, expensive labels, the kind of labels people buy when they're trying to impress someone. I glanced at them and then looked at Madison. She quickly moved that bags out of sight. An uncomfortable feeling settled in my stomach, but I ignored it. Again, that became a pattern. Little moments, small warning signs, tiny cracks in the foundation, each one easy to dismiss by itself. Together, they painted a very different picture. One Saturday afternoon, I arrived early to pick Ethan up for our usual weekend together. I let myself in after Madison texted that the door was unlocked. As I walked through the kitchen, I heard voices from the dining room. Madison and Brandon hadn't noticed I was there yet. "You should just ask her," Brandon said. "I already did last month," Madison replied. "Then ask again." There was frustration in her voice. "I don't want her thinking that's the only reason we call." Brandon laughed, a short, dismissive laugh. "Let's be honest, she loves helping. It makes her feel needed." I froze. My hand tightened around my purse. The conversation continued. "I'm just saying," Brandon added, "if she's willing to pay, why wouldn't we let her?" Madison didn't answer immediately. Then she quietly said something that hurt more than I expected. "Maybe. Maybe. Not no. Not that's unfair. Not she's my mother." Maybe. A single word. But it echoed inside my chest. Before they noticed me, I stepped back outside and pretended I had just arrived. A minute later, I rang the doorbell. When Madison opened the door, she smiled. The same smile she'd worn her entire life. But for some reason, it looked different that day. Less genuine. More practiced. I hated myself for thinking that. I wanted to believe I was imagining things. For Ethan's sake. For my own peace of mind. Yet the uncomfortable feeling remained. Over the following months, Brandon became increasingly bold. His comments shifted from subtle to obvious. One evening during dinner, he joked about retirement. "You've got more money than all of us, Katrina." I smiled politely. "Not really." He laughed. "Come on, you practically bankroll half this family." The table became quiet. Madison stared down at her plate. No one corrected him. No one said he was exaggerating. No one defended me. Ethan was too young to understand. Thankfully, I changed the subject. But inside, something hurt. Not because of the money. Because of what it revealed. Brandon wasn't grateful. He wasn't embarrassed. He saw my support as normal. Expected. Entitled. And increasingly Madison seemed to agree. The next major request arrived several months later. This time, it was a new vehicle. Brandon explained that their current SUV wasn't reliable enough. That statement surprised me because the vehicle was barely 3 years old. "We found a great deal," he said. Madison nodded beside him. "We just need a little help with the down payment." A little help. Their phrase, not mine. The amount they requested was larger than my first annual salary after college. I stared at the number. For the first time, I hesitated. Brandon noticed. His expression changed instantly. Not anger, something colder, annoyance, as though my hesitation itself was inappropriate, as though I had forgotten my role. The feeling disturbed me. Eventually, I agreed to contribute part of the money, not because I thought it was wise, because I couldn't stand the idea of disappointing Madison. Looking back, that may have been my biggest weakness. I confused love with rescue. I confused support with responsibility. I convinced myself that protecting my daughter meant shielding her from consequences. What I didn't realize was that every time I solved a problem, I was helping create a larger one. And while I was worrying about Madison's happiness, someone else was quietly shaping her view of me. Someone who benefited every time she chose him over me. Someone who understood exactly how to use money guilt and pride. Someone named Brandon Parker. I still didn't know how far things had gone. I still didn't know how much money had disappeared. I still didn't know how many lies had already been told. But the daughter who once called me every day was becoming someone I barely recognized. And the worst part, I was beginning to suspect that I wasn't being valued as family anymore. I was being valued as a resource that could eventually be discarded. I just hadn't realized how close that day really was. If there was one thing that kept me from confronting the growing distance between Madison and me, it was Ethan. My grandson had a way of making every worry disappear the moment he smiled. No matter how complicated life became, no matter how lonely my house felt, after Michael died, Ethan could walk through my front door and fill every room with life. He was 8 years old by then, curious, energetic, kind-hearted, and completely unaware of the tension that was slowly building among the adults around him. At least that's what I wanted to believe. Every Friday afternoon had become our tradition. I'd pick him up after school, and the moment he climbed into my car, he would start talking. Not walking, not sitting quietly, talking about dinosaurs, about baseball, about school, about whatever strange question happened to be floating around inside his young mind that day. Grandma Cat, do fish get thirsty? Grandma Cat, if a bird sits on a plane, is it flying too? Grandma Cat, why do adults drink coffee if they hate the taste? The last question made me laugh so hard, I nearly missed a stop sign. Weekends with Ethan became the brightest part of my life. Sometimes we baked chocolate chip cookies. Sometimes we planted flowers in my backyard. Sometimes we spent entire afternoons building ridiculous blanket forts in my living room. Those forts became our castles, our pirate ships, our secret headquarters, wherever Ethan's imagination wanted them to be. I kept a small bedroom ready for him. The walls were painted light blue. His favorite books sat on a shelf beside the bed. There were extra pajamas in the dresser, a baseball glove in the closet, a framed picture of the two of us fishing at a lake near Columbus. Whenever he stayed over, it felt less like a visit and more like family. Real family. The kind that doesn't require money to exist. The kind built on time, trust, love, and memories. One Saturday morning, we were planting tulips in the backyard when Ethan suddenly looked up at me. Grandma Cat? Yes. Why do you live alone? The question caught me off guard. I smiled gently. Because Grandpa Michael isn't here anymore. He nodded thoughtfully. Then he placed a small hand on mine. I think he'd be proud of you. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Tears filled my eyes. Children have a way of seeing directly into your heart. No filters, no hidden motives, just honesty. I hugged him tightly. Thank you, sweetheart. Moments like that meant everything to me. They reminded me why I kept giving, why I kept showing up, why I kept believing my family was worth every sacrifice. But gradually small changes began appearing. At first they seemed harmless. Little comments, odd phrases, things that didn't sound like Ethan. One evening while we were baking cookies, he asked me something strange. Grandma Cat, why do you make Mommy stressed? The mixing bowl nearly slipped from my hands. I forced a smile. What do you mean? He shrugged. Mommy said you make things harder sometimes. I stared at him, not because I was angry, because I was confused. Did Mommy say that? He nodded. Then he returned to stirring cookie dough as if the conversation had never happened. Children often repeat things they hear without understanding them. I knew that. Still, the comment lingered in my mind long after he left. A few weeks later, it happened again. This time, we were reading a book together before bedtime. Halfway through the story, Ethan interrupted. Grandma Cat? Yes. Why do grown-ups fight about money? The question felt strangely specific. My stomach tightened. Did someone tell you that? He nodded. Daddy said families shouldn't need money from grandparents. I closed the book, carefully, slowly, trying not to let my emotions show. What do you think? He shrugged. I don't know. Then he smiled. I just like being with you. That answer nearly broke my heart, because I suddenly realized something. Ethan wasn't hearing these things by accident. Someone was talking about me around him, frequently, often enough that he was beginning to absorb it. And children absorb everything, even when adults think they aren't listening, especially then. I tried not to overreact. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself every family has disagreements. I told myself Madison would never intentionally turn Ethan against me. But a seed of worry had been planted, and once planted, it began growing. Over the next several months, I noticed more changes. Ethan would occasionally hesitate before talking about certain subjects. He sometimes looked nervous when discussing his parents. And once, after spending the weekend with me, he asked a question that stayed with me for days. Do you and Mommy still love each other? The room became very quiet. I looked down at him. Of course I love your Mommy. He frowned. Then why does she get upset whenever people talk about you? That question frightened me more than anything else, because it revealed something important. The tension wasn't happening only during private conversations anymore. It was becoming part of everyday life, part of the atmosphere inside their home, something Ethan could feel, even if he didn't understand it. Children always know more than adults think. One Sunday afternoon, as I drove him home, Ethan seemed unusually quiet. Normally, he would spend the entire ride talking. That day, he stared out the window. When we pulled into Madison's driveway, he turned toward me. Can I ask you something? Anything. He hesitated, then spoke softly. Would you still love me if Mommy got mad at you? I felt my chest tighten. Why would you ask that? He looked down at his hands. I don't know. But his eyes told me otherwise. Someone had put that fear inside him. A child should never have to wonder whether love depends on adult conflicts. Never. I reached across the seat and squeezed his hand. Ethan listened to me very carefully. He looked up. There is absolutely nothing in this world that could make me stop loving you. His eyes brightened. Nothing. Nothing. He smiled, then hugged me before getting out of the car. I watched him run toward the house. For a brief moment, I felt relieved. But as he reached the front door, Madison stepped outside. I saw her speaking to him, saw her glance toward my car, saw her expression change. Cold, guarded, distant, the same expression I had been seeing more and more often. Something was happening. Something deeper than money. Something deeper than simple family disagreements. And although I didn't fully understand it yet, I could feel the distance growing between my daughter and me. What frightened me most was the possibility that Ethan was being pulled into the middle. Because if there was one thing I would never forgive myself for, it was allowing an innocent child to become collateral damage in an adult conflict. Unfortunately, I was already too late. The damage had begun long before I realized it, and soon it would become impossible to ignore. The day everything truly began to fall apart was Ethan's 8th birthday. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if Madison had already made her decision before that day. Maybe the birthday party was simply the moment she finally stopped pretending. Or maybe it was the moment Brandon convinced her to choose a side. Either way, it was the day my heart broke in front of an audience. The party was held at their house on a warm Saturday afternoon in early June. I had spent nearly 2 weeks preparing, not because anyone asked me to, because I wanted Ethan's birthday to be special. I had always loved birthdays. When Madison was little, I used to stay up half the night decorating cakes by hand. After Michael died, those traditions became even more important to me. They made me feel connected to the family, connected to the people I loved. For Ethan's birthday, I baked his favorite chocolate cake. 3 layers, blue frosting, baseball decorations. The entire thing took me almost 6 hours. I also bought him a new baseball glove he had been talking about for months. Not an expensive one, just one he had pointed out while we were shopping together. I remembered how excited he looked when he held it. That excitement mattered more to me than the price tag ever could. The morning of the party, I woke up feeling happy, hopeful, maybe even optimistic. For a little while, I convinced myself that the tension with Madison had been exaggerated in my mind. Maybe things weren't as bad as they seemed. Maybe we just needed more time together. Maybe we could still fix whatever had gone wrong. I arrived 30 minutes early to help set up. That used to be normal. In the past, Madison would have welcomed the extra help. This time, when she opened the door, something felt different immediately. Her smile barely reached her eyes. "Hi, Mom." No hug, no warmth, just politeness. I ignored the feeling. "Happy birthday weekend," I said cheerfully. She stepped aside. "Come in." The house was already full of activity. Children ran through the living room. Parents chatted near the kitchen. Music played softly in the background. Everything looked perfect. But beneath the surface, I sensed tension. Brandon appeared from the dining room carrying a tray of drinks. "Well, look who made it." His smile felt forced. I chose not to react. "I brought the cake." "Of course you did." The comment wasn't openly rude, but something about his tone made me uncomfortable, as though the cake wasn't a gift, as though it were evidence of something he had already decided about me. I placed the cake in the kitchen and tried to focus on Ethan. The moment he saw me, his entire face lit up. "Grandma Cat," he ran across the room. For a brief second, everything felt normal again. I opened my arms. He crashed into me with enough force to nearly knock me backward. I laughed. He laughed. For one beautiful moment, all the tension disappeared. Then I noticed Madison watching us. Her expression hardened. The feeling lasted only a second, but I saw it. And once I saw it, I couldn't forget it. The party continued. I helped serve food. I cleaned small messes. I refilled drinks. Old habits. The kind of things mothers and grandmothers naturally do. Several guests thanked me for the cake. Others complimented the decorations. Everything appeared peaceful until lunch. A group of adults had gathered around the patio table. The conversation shifted toward family finances, retirement, mortgage rates, inflation, normal topics. At first, I simply listened. Then Brandon decided to join the discussion. "I wish we had a secret financial angel like some people." Several guests laughed politely. I felt my stomach tighten. Someone asked what he meant. Brandon took a sip of his drink. "Oh, nothing. Just saying life is easier when someone else helps pay the bills." The table became quiet. I knew exactly who he was talking about. Everyone else knew too. I forced a smile. "I'm happy to help my family." Brandon grinned. "See, that's what I mean." The way he said it made me feel small, like a joke. like a walking checkbook. Not a mother, not a grandmother, not family, a resource. One of the guests quickly changed the subject, but the damage had already been done. The rest of the afternoon felt different, heavier, more uncomfortable. Then came the moment I will never forget. The children gathered in the backyard for presents. Ethan sat in a lawn chair opening gifts. Everyone stood nearby watching, laughing, taking pictures, enjoying the celebration. When Ethan opened the baseball glove I had bought him, his eyes widened. "This is the one!" He jumped out of his chair and ran toward me. "Grandma Cat, it's the exact one!" His excitement filled me with joy. I knelt down, he wrapped his arms around my neck, and that's when it happened. Madison stepped forward, without warning, without explanation. She placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Gentle sweetheart?" Then she pulled him back. Not aggressively, not violently, but deliberately. The message was unmistakable. A visible line had been drawn. Several people noticed. I saw the confusion on their faces. So did Ethan. He looked from me to his mother, then back to me, completely bewildered. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The laughter faded. Even the children seemed quieter. I stood up slowly, trying to understand what had just happened. "Everything okay?" I asked. Madison crossed her arms. "Yes." Her tone suggested otherwise. A few uncomfortable seconds passed. Then I heard Brandon's voice. "Oh, come on," he chuckled, that familiar condescending chuckle. "We're just trying to maintain healthy boundaries." The words hit me like a slap. Healthy boundaries. I stared at him. "What does that mean?" Madison answered before he could. "It means that not every relationship has to revolve around gifts and money." The air left my lungs. Several guests looked away. Others stared at the ground. Nobody wanted to be involved. I felt humiliation spreading through my chest. Not because of what she said, because of where she said it. In front of friends, neighbors, parents, children, and Ethan, especially Ethan. I lowered my voice. "Madison, maybe we should talk privately." She shook her head. "No, I think things need to be clear." The words frightened me because they sounded rehearsed, prepared, as though this conversation had been waiting for the right audience. Brandon leaned back in his chair, clearly satisfied. Then he delivered the sentence that changed everything. "Sometimes people use money to buy access to family." Silence. Complete silence. The entire backyard froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything I had done, after every sacrifice, after every dollar spent out of love, I was being accused of purchasing affection, purchasing my grandson's love. My hands trembled. Ethan looked terrified, and in that moment, I realized something painful. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This had been building for a long time. Someone had been telling a story about me. A story where I wasn't a loving grandmother. I was a manipulative woman who used money to control people. And somehow, my daughter had started believing it. I looked at Madison, hoping to see doubt, regret, anything. Instead, I saw determination. The same determination that would later lead her to make an even crueler decision. A decision that would shatter whatever remained of our relationship. But first, there would be one final conversation. A conversation waiting just beyond the front door after the guests went home. And it would change everything. I stayed long after the birthday party ended. Part of me wishes I hadn't. Part of me wishes I had simply gone home, cried into my pillow, and avoided what happened next. But mothers spend a lifetime trying to fix things, even when the damage is already done. Especially when the damage is already done. By early evening, most of the guests had left. The children were gone. The laughter had disappeared. Only a few paper plates and empty drink cups remained scattered around the backyard. I helped clean up automatically. Old habits. Even after being humiliated, I was still wiping counters and collecting trash. That's what mothers do. Or at least, that's what I had always done. Madison was loading dishes into the dishwasher. Brandon sat at the kitchen island scrolling through his phone. The silence felt heavy, unnatural, like a storm waiting to break. Finally, I placed the last stack of plates on the counter. "We need to talk." Madison didn't look at me. Brandon looked up briefly before returning to his phone. No one answered. I took a deep breath. "Madison." She sighed. A long, irritated sigh. "What, Mom?" Not concern, not curiosity. Irritation. As though I were creating a problem instead of trying to solve one. I stared at my daughter. The little girl I had once carried into kindergarten. The teenager whose college applications I helped fill out. The young woman who had cried in my arms before her wedding. She looked familiar, and completely unfamiliar at the same time. "What happened today?" I asked quietly. Her jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." "I didn't embarrass you." The response came instantly, prepared, defensive. "You and Brandon accused me of buying my grandson's love." Madison crossed her arms. "No, we said there need to be boundaries." The word again, boundaries, the newest weapon in modern family conflicts. A word that once meant healthy limits, now being used to justify cruelty. I tried to remain calm. "What boundaries?" "You don't understand how involved you are." I blinked. "Involved, yes." She finally looked directly at me. "You always have an opinion." I stared at her. "I babysit when you ask?" "You volunteer opinions. You ask for advice." "That's not the point." The conversation was already slipping away from reality. I could feel it. Every example I gave simply became proof against me. Every effort to explain myself became another accusation. Brandon finally put his phone down. "Maybe we should just be honest." I looked at him. For the first time all day, I stopped trying to be polite. "What exactly would you like to be honest about, Brandon?" His expression hardened. "You use money to stay involved in our lives." The accusation landed like a punch. I felt anger rising inside me. Not explosive anger, the slow burning kind, the kind that comes from deep betrayal. "I use money." "Yes." I laughed in disbelief, not because it was funny, because it was absurd. "You mean the money I never asked you to repay?" Neither of them spoke. "The money I gave because I love my family?" Silence. "The money you asked for?" Still silence. Brandon folded his arms. "That's exactly the problem." I stared at him. For a moment, I genuinely wondered whether I had misheard him. "The problem. Every time we struggle, you step in." Madison nodded. Actually nodded, as though this made perfect sense. I felt something break inside me. Not completely, but enough to hear the crack. "You asked for help." Madison looked away. "You never gave us room to figure things out ourselves." The statement left me speechless. For years, I had believed I was easing their burdens. Now I was being told I had created them. No matter what I said, I was wrong. If I helped, I was controlling. If I didn't help, I would have been selfish. There was no version of reality where I wasn't the villain. I looked at my daughter carefully. "Do you really believe that?" She hesitated, only briefly. Then she nodded, and that hurt more than anything Brandon had said. Because Brandon didn't matter. Madison mattered. Her opinion mattered. Her belief mattered. Her judgment mattered. And somehow she had reached a point where she saw my love as manipulation. I swallowed hard. "What about Ethan?" The room became quiet. "What about him?" she asked. I could hear my own heartbeat. What does any of this have to do with him? Madison's expression changed, subtly, but noticeably. The answer was coming. The answer my heart already feared. I think some distance would be healthy. The words barely registered. Distance? For a while? I stared at her, trying to understand, trying to process, trying desperately to convince myself she couldn't possibly mean what I thought she meant. Then she said it. I don't think you should see Ethan right now. The world seemed to stop. Everything became strangely quiet. Even the refrigerator humming in the corner disappeared. For several seconds, I honestly couldn't speak. I simply stared at her, certain I had misunderstood. You don't want me to see Ethan? Madison shook her head. Not until we figure things out? My throat tightened. You're serious. Yes. The word felt like a knife. I looked at Brandon. He remained silent, watching, almost satisfied, as though this outcome had been expected. Perhaps planned. I turned back to Madison. What exactly are you punishing me for? No one is punishing you. Then what would you call this? She took a deep breath. Then she delivered the sentence that would replay in my mind for weeks afterward. You don't get access to my son just because you pay for things. The room spun, not physically, emotionally. Everything suddenly made sense. The comments, the accusations, the resentment, the hostility. In their minds, every birthday gift, every tuition payment, every mortgage contribution, every act of love had been transformed into evidence. Evidence that I was trying to purchase a relationship. And because they believed that story, they no longer saw my relationship with Ethan as genuine. They saw it as transactional. I felt tears gathering in my eyes. Not dramatic tears, quiet ones. The kind that come when your heart finally accepts something it has been refusing to believe. I love him. My voice cracked. He's my grandson. Madison looked away. I know. Then how can you do this? No answer, just silence. Cold silence. The kind that hurts more than shouting. Finally, I picked up my purse. My hands were trembling. I moved toward the front door. Nobody stopped me. Nobody apologized. Nobody changed their mind. As I reached the doorway, I heard footsteps. Small footsteps. Ethan. He appeared at the end of the hallway wearing his pajamas. His eyes immediately found mine. Grandma Cat? The sound nearly destroyed me. I forced a smile. Hi, sweetheart. He walked closer. Are you leaving already? I looked at Madison. She remained expressionless. So did Brandon. Yes. His face fell. When will I see you again? I couldn't answer, because I honestly didn't know. For a moment I thought I might break down completely. Instead, I bent down and kissed his forehead. I love you, buddy. I love you too. Then I walked out the door. The drive home felt endless. I cried harder than I had cried since Michael's funeral. Not because I had lost an argument, not because my daughter had insulted me, because for the first time in my life, someone had used the person I loved most as leverage against me, and somehow the cruelest part was still waiting. Because at 8:17 the following morning, less than 12 hours after banning me from seeing Ethan, Madison sent me a text message. No apology, no explanation, no mention of our conversation. Just one sentence. Mom, can you transfer the mortgage payment today? I stared at the screen, and for the first time in years, I didn't immediately reach for my checkbook. I stared at Madison's text message for nearly 10 minutes. Mom, can you transfer the mortgage payment today? That was it. No, how are you? No, I'm sorry about yesterday. No acknowledgement that she had just banned me from seeing my grandson. Just a reminder about money. For years, I would have responded immediately. I would have opened my banking app, transferred the funds, sent a heart emoji, then convinced myself everything was fine. But something inside me had changed the night before. Not my love for Madison, not my love for Ethan. Those remained exactly the same. What changed was my willingness to ignore reality. I set the phone down on the kitchen table and made myself a cup of coffee. The house felt unusually quiet. Michael used to tell me that important decisions should never be made in anger. "Sleep on it first," he would say, "then decide." Well, I had slept, barely, but I had slept, and the pain I felt that morning wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. For the first time, I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What exactly was I paying for? The answer frightened me, because I wasn't entirely sure anymore. I wasn't paying for emergencies. I wasn't paying for necessities. I wasn't helping them survive. I was financing a lifestyle that somehow included humiliating me while continuing to expect my support. I carried my coffee into my home office and sat down in front of my computer. At first, I intended to review only the mortgage payments. Nothing more, but once I started opening records, I couldn't stop. I pulled up bank statements, credit card records, automatic payment schedules, wire transfers, check copies, years of financial history. The deeper I looked, the more shocked I became. The mortgage payment wasn't the only thing I covered, not even close. There was Ethan's school tuition, his after-school programs, part of the family's health insurance, the lease payment on Madison's vehicle, several recurring household expenses, holiday gifts, emergency transfers, vacation assistance, and dozens of miscellaneous payments I had completely forgotten about. I spent nearly 4 hours reviewing everything. By noon, I had filled multiple sheets of paper with notes. Then I totaled the numbers. I wish I hadn't. The amount made me physically sick. Over the years, I had contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not loans, not investments, gifts, support, love. At least that's what I had believed. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. For a moment, I felt embarrassed. Not because I had helped, because I had never established limits. I had spent years telling myself I was strengthening my family. Instead, I had removed every incentive for them to stand on their own. And worst of all, they no longer appreciated the sacrifice. They expected it. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Madison. "Did you see my message?" No mention of Ethan. No mention of our conversation. Only money. Again. Something inside me finally snapped into place. Not emotionally, logically. I opened my online banking account. One by one, I began reviewing every automatic payment connected to Madison's household. Mortgage contribution. Active. School tuition transfer. Active. Vehicle payment assistance. Active. Insurance support. Active. Monthly emergency fund transfer. Active. The list continued. Each item felt like a chapter of my life. A chapter written with good intentions, a chapter I now had to close. My hands trembled slightly as I moved the cursor toward the first cancellation option. I hesitated. Not because I doubted the decision. Because I knew what would happen next. The moment those payments stopped, Madison would notice. Brandon would notice. The comfortable safety net beneath their lives would disappear, and they would blame me. But then, another thought entered my mind. Hadn't they already blamed me? Hadn't they already accused me of controlling them? Hadn't they already decided I was manipulating them with money? If that was truly what they believed, then perhaps they should experience life without my financial involvement. Perhaps they should have exactly what they claimed they wanted: independence. I clicked cancel, then another, and another, and another. Each cancellation felt strangely peaceful, painful, but peaceful. I wasn't attacking anyone. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't punishing my daughter. I was simply stepping back, respecting the boundaries she had demanded. If money didn't buy access to Ethan, then money no longer had a place in our relationship. When I finished, I sat silently for several minutes. The room felt different, lighter somehow. Then I remembered the paperwork, the records, the transactions. Something had bothered me while reviewing them earlier. A recurring transfer, small enough to avoid attention, large enough to raise questions. I reopened the financial records and began searching again. There it was, a monthly transfer I didn't recognize. The account wasn't under Madison's name. It wasn't connected to their mortgage company. It wasn't connected to Ethan's school. The recipient was listed as a private account. I checked another month, then another, then another. The same transfer appeared repeatedly, every single month. Curiosity turned into concern. I started digging deeper. The account holder's information wasn't immediately available, but certain identifying details appeared in the records. The more I examined them, the more uncomfortable I became. Because the account seemed connected to Brandon, not directly, indirectly, as though someone had intentionally tried to make the trail difficult to follow. I frowned. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe it was a savings account. Maybe it was an investment. Maybe I was imagining things. Still, something felt wrong. Very wrong. I made a note of the account information and saved copies of the records. Then I closed my laptop. For the rest of the afternoon, I tried distracting myself. I watered flowers, folded laundry, cleaned the kitchen. Nothing worked. My thoughts kept returning to Ethan. I wondered whether he missed me. I wondered whether he understood what was happening. Most of all, I wondered what Madison had told him. That evening, I sat alone on my back porch. The same porch where Michael and I had spent countless evenings together. The sunset painted the sky orange and gold. Normally, I would have found it beautiful. That night, I barely noticed. Around 7 o'clock, my phone rang. Madison. I knew why she was calling. The mortgage payment had not arrived. I let the phone ring, then stop, then ring again, then stop again. Voicemail notifications appeared. Text messages followed. At first, they were confused. Mom. Then concerned. Did something happen? Then irritated. The payment hasn't gone through. Finally angry. We need to talk. I looked at the messages without responding. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to fix their problem. And strangely enough, that realization hurt almost as much as the conflict itself. Because I never wanted to become this version of myself. The version who ignored her daughter's calls. The version who withdrew support. The version who said no. But another truth was becoming impossible to ignore. The version of myself who always said yes had brought us here. Somewhere along the way, my generosity had become an expectation. My support had become an entitlement. My love had become a resource, and unless something changed, it would stay that way forever. As darkness settled over the yard, another text message arrived. This one from Brandon. Short, direct, and noticeably less polite than usual. We need answers. Call us. I stared at the screen. Then I set the phone face down on the table. Tomorrow they would get their answers. And when they did, nothing in our family would ever be the same again. The phone started ringing at 7:03 the next morning. I know the exact time because I had barely slept. Every few hours, I had woken up thinking about Ethan, wondering whether he was eating breakfast, wondering whether he missed me, wondering whether Madison regretted what she had done. The ringing pulled me from another restless moment. Madison. I stared at the screen, let it ring, then stop, then start again. The third call came less than a minute later. This time I answered. Katrina Rhodes speaking. There was a brief silence. Then my daughter's voice exploded through the phone. What did you do? No greeting, no concern, no apology, just anger. I took a slow sip of coffee. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Her voice was rising. The mortgage payment didn't go through. I remained calm. Oh. Oh. Yes. That's all you have to say. I looked out the kitchen window. The morning sun was shining across the backyard. Birds moved through the trees. The peacefulness felt strange compared to the chaos coming through the phone. You told me there needed to be boundaries, I said. Another silence, then a sharp exhale. Mom, this isn't funny. I'm not joking. What are you doing? For the first time since the argument, I said exactly what I had been thinking. I'm respecting your wishes. The silence lasted longer this time. Then came confusion. What does that even mean? I leaned back in my chair. It means you were right. About what? Money shouldn't buy access to your son. The words landed exactly as I intended, a direct reflection of her own statement. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then I heard another voice in the background. Brandon. What is she saying? Madison covered the phone briefly, then returned. Mom, stop playing games. I'm not playing games. Then transfer the payment. The entitlement in that sentence shocked me. Not because it existed, because she couldn't hear it. She genuinely believed the request was reasonable. After everything that had happened, after banning me from Ethan's life, after humiliating me publicly, she still expected immediate financial support. I closed my eyes. Suddenly, I felt exhausted, not physically, emotionally. Madison. What? When was the last time you called to ask how I was doing? She didn't answer. When was the last time you visited without needing something? Silence. When was the last time you thanked me? The silence grew heavier. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I genuinely wanted her to think. Unfortunately, Brandon jumped into the conversation before she could. I heard the phone change hands. Then his voice appeared. Cold, sharp, defensive. Katrina, let's not do this. I laughed softly. You mean, let's not discuss reality? You're overreacting. The statement almost amused me. Overreacting. The favorite word of people who benefit from someone else's sacrifices. I'm overreacting because my daughter cut me off from my grandson. That's not what happened. It isn't. No. I waited. He offered no further explanation, because there wasn't one. Instead, he changed direction. The mortgage is due. There it was, back to money, always back to money. I suddenly realized something important. Neither of them had called to repair the relationship. Neither of them had called to discuss Ethan. Neither of them had called to apologize. They called because the payment was missing. The realization hurt. But it also strengthened my resolve. I spoke carefully. I'm no longer making those payments. The line went silent, completely silent. Then Brandon laughed. Not a happy laugh, a disbelieving one. Come on, I'm serious. No, you're upset. I'm serious. You'll calm down. I'm serious. Each repetition made his confidence weaken. Finally, I heard genuine concern enter his voice. You stopped all of them. I said nothing. That answer was enough. A moment later, I heard Madison gasp in the background. Oh, what do you mean, all of them? Apparently, Brandon hadn't told her yet, or perhaps he hadn't known himself. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. Then I remembered Ethan standing behind that door. The sympathy faded. The next hour became chaos. Text messages arrived constantly. Mortgage, insurance, school tuition, vehicle payment. Every canceled transfer was being discovered one by one. Each discovery created another wave of panic. By lunchtime, Madison had called 12 times. Brandon had called 8. I answered only once more. This time, Madison was crying. Real tears, not anger, fear. Mom, Ethan's school called. I remained silent. They said tuition hasn't been paid. I know. Her breathing became shaky. You can't do this. The statement struck me, not because it was cruel, because it revealed how deeply dependent they had become. They genuinely believed I couldn't stop, that my support was permanent, guaranteed, obligatory, like taxes. Or gravity, something that simply existed. I spoke quietly. I already did. She started crying harder. You're hurting Ethan! That accusation cut deep, because Ethan was the one person I never wanted to hurt. But another truth existed, one I could no longer ignore. I wasn't the one who had weaponized Ethan. They had. I swallowed hard. Madison, who decided I couldn't see him anymore. She didn't answer. Who made that decision? Silence. Was it me? More silence. Finally, she whispered, No. I felt tears gathering in my own eyes. Because despite everything, she was still my daughter. Still the little girl I once loved more than life itself. And hearing her cry was painful. Very painful. But some lessons only arrive when consequences finally appear. Then she said something that stunned me. If you don't restart the payments, Ethan will think you abandoned him. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because they were true, because they sounded deliberate, calculated, as though someone had already discussed this possibility, as though a narrative had already been prepared. I sat quietly for several seconds. Then I answered, No. Her voice cracked. What? No, he won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. How? Because Ethan knows I love him? The conversation ended shortly afterward. Neither of us knew what else to say. By late afternoon, the situation had become even worse. My phone buzzed with notifications. Family members, cousins, aunts, family friends. People I hadn't spoken to in months. Apparently, Madison had started calling relatives. And apparently, she had presented a very different version of events. According to them, I had suddenly decided to punish my daughter. I was being selfish, petty, controlling, vindictive. Some messages were merely disappointing. Others were cruel. One cousin actually wrote, How can you hurt your grandson over a disagreement? I stared at the message, then set the phone down, because none of them knew the truth. None of them knew about the birthday party. None of them knew about Ethan being taken away from me. None of them knew about the years of financial support. They only knew the story Madison had chosen to tell, and unfortunately she had told it first. As evening approached, I sat alone on my porch again. The same porch, the same chair, the same loneliness. But this time, there was something else. A feeling I couldn't quite identify. Not satisfaction, not happiness, certainly not victory. Perhaps it was dignity. For the first time in years, I had refused to buy peace. For the first time in years, I had refused to accept mistreatment in exchange for access to family. The cost was painful, terribly painful. But deep down I knew something important. The storm was only beginning, and when the truth finally surfaced, everyone would discover that the missing mortgage payment was the smallest problem in Madison and Brandon's marriage. By the end of that week, I had become the villain of the family. It happened faster than I ever imagined possible. Years of sacrifices had been erased in a matter of days. Decades of support had been reduced to a single narrative. Katrina Rhodes was punishing her daughter because she didn't get her way. That was the story being told. And unfortunately, it was the story most people chose to believe. The first signs appeared on social media. I normally didn't spend much time on Facebook, but several friends called me after seeing a post Madison had shared. At first, I didn't want to look. Part of me already knew what I would find. Eventually, curiosity won. I opened my laptop and found the post. It wasn't directed at me by name. That was intentional. People often tell the most damaging stories without mentioning names. The post read, Some people only help when it gives them control. The moment you set boundaries, their true colors appear. Protect your peace, even when it's difficult. Below the post sat hundreds of reactions. Hearts, sad faces, angry faces, comments. So many comments. People praised her courage. People called her strong. People congratulated her for standing up to a toxic parent. One woman wrote, "Good for you. Nobody should be allowed to buy access to children." Another wrote, "Sounds like narcissistic behavior." A third commented, "My mother did the same thing. Stay strong." I stared at the screen. The accusations weren't even based on facts. Most of these people had never met me, yet they felt completely comfortable judging me. Worse, Madison wasn't correcting anyone. She wasn't clarifying. She wasn't defending me. She was allowing strangers to create a version of me that barely resembled reality. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking, not from anger, from sadness. The deepest kind of sadness. The kind that comes when someone you love helps rewrite your identity. Over the following days, phone calls continued. Aunt Denise called, then Cousin Rachel, then my nephew Tyler. Every conversation followed the same pattern. Concern, confusion, judgment. Most of them believed I should simply restart the payments. "She's your daughter." I know. "Family comes first." I know. "Ethan shouldn't suffer." I know. Nobody asked why I stopped. Nobody asked what happened before. Nobody seemed interested in hearing my side. I began to understand something important. Many people don't want the truth. They want the simplest explanation. And the simplest explanation was that an older woman had become bitter and stubborn. That story required no effort, no investigation, no uncomfortable questions. Meanwhile, Madison's version required only sympathy. So sympathy was what she received. I chose not to defend myself. Not publicly, not online, not through gossip. Michael always believed that truth didn't need to shout. Truth simply needed time. I hoped he was right. Still, the loneliness was crushing. For the first time in years, entire weekends passed without seeing Ethan. No Friday pickups, no Saturday baking, no Sunday movie nights. My guest room remained untouched. His favorite blanket stayed folded on the bed. The baseball glove he had left behind sat exactly where he had placed it months earlier. Every corner of my house reminded me of him, and every reminder hurt. One afternoon, while I was trimming flowers in the backyard, my phone rang. The caller ID surprised me. Olivia Bennett, my cousin. Technically, my second cousin, though we had always been close. Olivia was 62, sharp-minded, blunt, the kind of woman who could spot nonsense from a mile away. I answered. "Hi, Olivia." Her voice was unusually serious. "Katrina, I need to ask you something." "Okay. Are you sure you're getting the full story from Madison?" The question immediately caught my attention. "What do you mean?" A pause. Then Olivia sighed. "I think Brandon is lying about something." My stomach tightened. For months, I had suspected Brandon was involved somehow. Now someone else was saying it aloud. "What happened?" Olivia hesitated. "I wasn't sure whether to tell you." "Tell me." A longer silence followed. Then she spoke. 3 weeks ago, I was in Cincinnati visiting my sister. I listened carefully. We stopped at a casino outside town. I frowned. "Okay." "Katrina, I saw Brandon there." The pruning shears slipped from my hand. "What?" "I saw him." I stood frozen. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." My heartbeat quickened. Maybe there was an explanation. A business meeting, a dinner, a conference, something innocent. Olivia continued. "He wasn't eating." I remained silent. "He wasn't attending an event." Still silent. "He was gambling." The words landed heavily, very heavily, because they immediately connected with the strange financial records I had found. The mysterious account, the unexplained transfers, the missing money. Suddenly, everything felt less random. "What exactly did you see?" I asked. "I saw him at a blackjack table." I closed my eyes. "He stayed there for hours." My stomach twisted. "Did he see you?" "No." That part didn't surprise me. Brandon probably wasn't expecting family members to appear at a casino several hours from home. Then Olivia said something even more concerning. "I took a picture." I opened my eyes. "You what?" I didn't know whether it would matter. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. A text message arrived. Attached was a photograph. I opened it, and there he was. Brandon, no question, no doubt, standing beside a blackjack table, holding chips, focused completely on the game. The timestamp showed a date only 2 weeks before Ethan's birthday party. I stared at the image. A cold feeling spread through my chest, because I suddenly remembered several financial emergencies that had happened around the same period. The mortgage assistance request, the vehicle payment issue, the tuition concerns, the mysterious transfers, everything. Olivia's voice interrupted my thoughts. "Katrina, I'm here. I don't know what's going on, but something doesn't add up." I looked at the photograph again. "No?" My voice sounded distant. "It doesn't." After ending the call, I spent nearly an hour reviewing the image. Not because I doubted it, because I was trying to understand its significance. If Brandon had gambling problems, everything changed. Not just financially, emotionally. Because gambling destroys trust, and trust was already crumbling. Then another realization struck me. Madison had never mentioned the casino. Not once. Which meant one of two things. Either she didn't know, or she knew and was hiding it. Neither possibility was good. That evening, I reopened my financial records. For the first time, I wasn't simply reviewing numbers. I was looking for patterns, connections, evidence. And the more I searched, the more convinced I became that Brandon's finances were hiding something much larger than simple overspending. The mortgage payments, the missing transfers, the secret account, the casino photograph. Individually, each piece meant little. Together, they formed the outline of a much darker picture. A picture I wasn't ready to fully see, yet. But for the first time since all of this began, I felt something unexpected. Not relief, not happiness. Hope. Because if Brandon was hiding something, then eventually the truth would surface. And when it did, people might finally stop asking why I cut off the money. They might start asking a much more important question. Where had all that money actually gone? The photograph Olivia sent should have made me feel vindicated. Instead, it made me nervous. Very nervous. Because if Brandon had truly been gambling, then the situation was no longer about hurt feelings or family conflict. It was about deception. And deception has a way of spreading far beyond the original lie. For several days, I couldn't stop thinking about the image. I studied it repeatedly. Not because I doubted what I was seeing, because I was trying to understand how deep the problem went. One evening, I finally decided I needed professional advice. Not legal action, not revenge, just clarity. There was only one person I trusted enough to call. David Foster. David had been Michael's financial advisor for nearly 20 years. After Michael passed away, David helped me organize the estate and retirement accounts. He was meticulous, patient, and most importantly, honest. If something was wrong, David wouldn't sugarcoat it. I called his office the following morning. To my surprise, he remembered me immediately. "Katrina Rhodes," he said warmly. "It's been a while." "It has." "Everything okay?" I looked out the window. "No." A pause. "Come see me." 2 days later, I sat across from him in a conference room. The same conference room where Michael and I had once discussed retirement plans. The memory alone nearly brought me to tears. David noticed. Still miss him. Every day. He nodded. Then he leaned forward. Now tell me what's going on. For the next hour, I explained everything. The birthday party. The accusations. Being cut off from Ethan. The canceled payments. The mysterious account. The casino photograph. David listened carefully, without interrupting, without judging. When I finally finished, he folded his hands. Do you have the financial records? I slid a folder across the table. I made copies. His eyebrows lifted. Good. He spent nearly 40 minutes reviewing documents. Page after page, transaction after transaction. Occasionally making notes, occasionally frowning. The longer he looked, the more serious he became. Finally, he set the papers down. Katrina. Something about his tone made my stomach tighten. What? You're right. The room became very quiet. About what? There are serious irregularities here. I swallowed. What kind of irregularities? David tapped several pages. The money isn't going where it's supposed to go. I stared at him. Even though I suspected it, hearing someone else confirm it felt different. More real. More frightening. He pointed toward one section. These transfers concern me. The account, yes? I nodded. I thought so. David leaned back. I can't tell you exactly who owns it without additional records. But, his expression hardened. But I can tell you that the account receives money shortly after several transfers made by Madison. The room seemed smaller, warmer, harder to breathe. What does that mean? It means someone is moving money. The words landed heavily, very heavily, because I immediately understood the implication. Someone. Not necessarily Madison, not necessarily Brandon, but someone. And if someone was secretly moving money, there was a reason. David continued. I also noticed something else. I looked up. What? He slid another document toward me. Several credit inquiries appeared on the report. Multiple lenders. Multiple dates. Multiple applications. I frowned. I don't understand. David pointed to the names. Most belonged to Brandon. One did not. I felt my pulse quicken. That's Madison? David nodded. Yes? Why would she need all these loans? He was silent for a moment. Then he answered carefully. That's the problem. What problem? Some of them don't appear to benefit her. I stared at him. My mouth went dry. What are you saying? David chose his words carefully. I'm saying it's possible someone used her information to secure credit. The room went silent. For several seconds, I couldn't process the statement. Then the realization hit. Hard. You think Brandon used her identity? David exhaled slowly. I can't prove it. But it's possible. Very possible. I felt sick, physically sick, because everything suddenly began fitting together. The constant financial emergencies, the missing money, the gambling, the secret account, the loans, the panic whenever money stopped arriving. All of it, every piece. And for the first time, I considered a possibility I had been avoiding. What if Madison wasn't the mastermind? What if she was trapped? The thought unsettled me because it conflicted with my anger. For weeks, I had viewed her as someone who willingly chose Brandon over her own mother, someone who weaponized Ethan, someone who humiliated me. And perhaps she had. But what if there was more to the story?
David interrupted my thoughts. Has Madison ever mentioned financial stress? I laughed bitterly. Constantly. More than usual. I thought about it, then slowly nodded. Actually, yes. When, the last year or two, David scribbled another note. That's important. Why? Because people hiding financial problems often create appearances. The sentence immediately reminded me of social media. The luxury SUV, the vacations, the expensive restaurants, the designer clothes, all those perfect family photographs. Suddenly, they looked different. Less like success, more like camouflage. David looked directly at me. Katrina, I need to ask something difficult. Okay. How much does Madison know? The question lingered in the room. Because I didn't know, and that uncertainty frightened me most. If she knew everything, then she had participated in the deception. If she knew nothing, then she was living inside a financial disaster she didn't fully understand. Neither answer felt comforting. I don't know, David nodded. Then that's where you start. How? He folded the folder closed. Carefully. I drove home feeling emotionally exhausted. Part of me wanted to call Madison immediately. Part of me wanted to demand answers. Part of me wanted to expose everything. Fortunately, experience had taught me something. People reveal more when they don't realize they're being investigated. So I waited. And over the next several days, new information continued appearing. Small things, subtle things, but meaningful. One afternoon, I noticed Brandon selling items online: a golf set, an expensive watch, several electronics. The listings appeared on local marketplace groups. The timing felt suspicious. Then Olivia called again. Apparently, Brandon had borrowed money from another relative. A relative who believed he was covering medical expenses. That explanation sounded familiar. Too familiar. Because he had told different people different stories. And people only do that when they're hiding something. The more information surfaced, the clearer the pattern became. Debt. Lots of debt. Hidden debt. Dangerous debt. Then came the discovery that truly shocked me. It arrived through an accidental conversation. A friend of mine worked at a local bank branch. She wasn't sharing confidential information. She was sharing gossip, the kind that travels through small communities. Apparently, Brandon had recently been seen arguing with a bank representative. Loudly, publicly, desperately. The word desperately stayed with me, because desperate people make reckless decisions, and reckless people often drag others down with them. That night, I sat alone in my living room thinking about Madison, not the woman who had humiliated me, not the woman who banned me from Ethan, the little girl I raised, the little girl who used to run into my arms after school, the little girl who once trusted me completely. For the first time in weeks, my anger softened, only slightly, but enough to allow another emotion inside. Concern. Because if Brandon's financial situation was truly collapsing, then Madison was standing closer to the explosion than she realized. And Ethan was standing closest of all. That thought terrified me, because money problems can destroy marriages, but secrets destroy families. And I was beginning to suspect Brandon wasn't just hiding debt. He was hiding something much worse. Something that would soon force Madison to confront a truth she had spent years avoiding. The question was whether she would discover it before everything around her collapsed. Or after. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning. At first, I almost didn't answer. The previous few weeks had been filled with calls I didn't want. Family members offering opinions. Relatives repeating gossip. Messages that somehow managed to criticize me while claiming to help. I was exhausted, emotionally drained. So when an unfamiliar number appeared on my screen, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Something made me answer anyway. Hello? A woman's voice responded. Mrs. Rhodes. Yes. My name is Sarah Mitchell. The name sounded vaguely familiar. I'm Ethan Parker's teacher. My entire body stiffened, instantly. The moment she said Ethan's name, everything else disappeared. Is he okay? There was a brief pause. That's actually why I'm calling. Fear flooded my chest. The kind of fear only grandparents understand. the kind that arrives before facts, before explanations, before reason. What happened? Nothing specific. That answer didn't help at all. Then why are you calling? Her voice softened. I wasn't sure whether I should. My heart sank. Whenever someone says that bad news usually follows. Ethan hasn't been in school much lately. I frowned. What do you mean? He has missed several days over the last few weeks. That surprised me. Madison had always been strict about education, even during difficult periods. What reason did they give? Different reasons. My stomach tightened. Different. Sometimes illness. Another pause. Sometimes family issues. I sat down slowly, because something about the conversation felt wrong. Very wrong. Has anyone spoken with Madison? Several times. The hesitation in Sarah's voice became more noticeable. Mrs. Rhodes, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but I've known Ethan for 2 years. I listened carefully. He's usually cheerful. My throat tightened. And now? Silence, then a quiet answer. He seems scared. The words hit me harder than I expected. Scared. Not sad, not distracted. Scared. My hands began trembling. Did he tell you why? No. I closed my eyes because I already knew the answer. Whatever was happening inside that house had become visible, even to people outside the family. Sarah continued. Last week he started crying during class. The room seemed smaller, warmer, harder to breathe. Why? He wouldn't say. My eyes filled with tears. I imagined Ethan sitting alone at his desk, trying to hide fear he couldn't explain, trying to make sense of problems adults had created. The image broke my heart. Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure whether I should. You did the right thing. We spoke for a few more minutes. Then the call ended. I sat motionless afterward, staring at the wall, thinking, praying, worrying. For the first time since all this began, my concern outweighed my anger completely. I didn't care about Facebook. I didn't care about gossip. I didn't care about being right. I cared about Ethan. Only Ethan. That afternoon, I considered calling Madison. Several times. Each time I stopped myself. The last conversation between us had ended badly, and if Brandon truly controlled as much of the situation as I suspected, a direct confrontation might make things worse. So I waited. 3 more days passed. Then something happened that changed everything. It was nearly 9 o'clock at night. I was sitting in my living room reading, or at least pretending to read. The truth was, I had reread the same page 6 times without absorbing a single word. My thoughts remained fixed on Ethan. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Again? I almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, I answered. Hello? Silence. For a moment, I thought the call had disconnected. Then I heard breathing. Soft breathing. Nervous breathing. And finally, a tiny voice. Grandma Cat. The book slipped from my hands. Ethan. My heart nearly stopped. Grandma Cat, it's me. Tears instantly filled my eyes. Oh, sweetheart. I stood up so quickly I nearly knocked over a lamp. Are you okay? A pause, then a shaky answer. I don't know. The fear in his voice was unmistakable. Children shouldn't sound that frightened. Not at 8 years old. Not ever. I forced myself to remain calm. Where are your parents? They're downstairs. Do they know you're calling? No. My stomach dropped. He was hiding. Actually hiding. I lowered my voice. What's going on? Several seconds passed. Then I heard him sniffle. I miss you. The words shattered me completely. I miss you too. I wanted to call sooner.
More tears. I couldn't. I sat down again. My legs suddenly felt weak. Why not? A long silence followed. When he finally answered, his voice was barely above a whisper. Daddy gets mad. My heart sank. What does he get mad about? Talking about you. I closed my eyes. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Then I asked the question carefully. Has something happened at home? Another pause. Then, they fight all the time now. My stomach tightened. Your mom and dad? Yes. About what? I don't know. He sniffled again. Money. The word hung heavily between us. Money. Always money. The thing that had poisoned everything. I listened carefully, trying not to push, trying not to scare him. Then Ethan said something that made my blood run cold. There were strangers at the house. What strangers? I don't know. What happened? His breathing became shaky. They came to the door. I gripped the phone tighter, and they wanted Daddy. A terrible feeling spread through my chest. What did they say? I don't know. His voice cracked, but Daddy yelled. I felt sick, physically sick. Children notice more than adults realize. If Ethan remembered it, the encounter had been frightening. Then came the sentence that truly terrified me. Daddy said we might have to leave. Every muscle in my body tensed. Leave? Maybe tonight. The room spun. I struggled to remain calm. Did he say where? No. Did your mom say anything? She was crying. I stared into space, unable to process what I was hearing. The situation was deteriorating faster than I realized. Much faster. And Ethan was trapped in the middle of it. Sweetheart. Yeah. Listen to me. I took a deep breath. No matter what happens, I love you. His voice immediately softened. I love you too. And if you're ever scared, you can always call me. Okay? More silence. Then something unexpected. Grandma Cat. Yes. You didn't leave me, right? The question broke whatever remained of my composure, because this wasn't a child asking about logistics. This was a child asking whether he had been abandoned. Someone had planted that fear inside him, and now he was carrying it alone. I wiped tears from my face. No, my voice shook. I would never leave you. Promise? I promise. Another pause. Then I heard footsteps in the background, adult footsteps, moving closer. Ethan immediately whispered, I have to go. Fear returned to his voice. Wait. The line disconnected. Gone. Just like that. I sat frozen, phone still pressed against my ear. The silence afterward felt unbearable. Because now I knew this wasn't just financial trouble anymore. This wasn't just family conflict. This wasn't just a disagreement between a mother and daughter. Something inside that house was falling apart. Rapidly. Dangerously. And for the first time since all this began, I stopped wondering whether I should get involved. The question now was how. Because if Ethan was frightened enough to secretly call me at night, then waiting on the sidelines was no longer an option. And deep down, I feared something else. If Brandon was desperate enough to talk about leaving overnight, then whatever he was hiding was much worse than anyone imagined. I didn't sleep at all after Ethan's phone call. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice. Daddy said we might have to leave tonight. You didn't leave me, right? Those words echoed through my mind until sunrise. By 6 o'clock the next morning, I was already sitting at my kitchen table with a notebook, a cup of untouched coffee, and a decision to make. For weeks, I had tried to stay out of the situation. I had convinced myself that giving Madison space was the right thing to do. I had hoped the truth would reveal itself naturally. I had hoped she would eventually call me, eventually apologize, eventually come to her senses. But Ethan's call changed everything, because this was no longer about pride, no longer about hurt feelings, no longer about who was right. A frightened child was involved. And once a child is frightened, responsible, adults have to act. The question was how. I refused to do anything reckless. I refused to storm into their house. I refused to create a dramatic confrontation. Most importantly, I refused to do anything that might traumatize Ethan further. So I called David Foster. He answered on the second ring. Katrina, I need advice. His voice immediately became serious. What happened? I told him everything. Sarah's concerns, Ethan's secret phone call, the strangers at the house, the mention of leaving, the fear in Ethan's voice. David listened carefully. When I finished, he spoke slowly. Have you considered that Brandon may be in serious financial trouble? Yes. I think it's worse than either of us realized. I closed my eyes. So, what do I do? There was a pause. Then he answered carefully. You don't take Ethan. I wasn't planning to. You don't threaten anyone. I won't. You don't try to win. The statement surprised me. What do you mean? You focus on protecting the child. I wrote the words down immediately. Protect the child, not punish Brandon, not expose Madison. Protect Ethan. David continued. If Ethan is frightened, and there are signs of instability, document everything. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I have the teacher's concerns. Good. I have the phone call. Document it. I have the financial records. Keep them. Then he said something important. And Katrina, yes. Don't assume Madison knows everything. The statement lingered, because lately I had started wondering the same thing. For weeks I had viewed Madison as my adversary. But what if she wasn't? What if she was trapped in the same disaster? After ending the call, I spent several hours organizing everything. Dates, conversations, financial documents, notes, photographs, the casino picture, the unexplained transfers, the loan activity, every piece. Not because I wanted a legal battle, because I wanted facts. Facts matter, especially when emotions are running high. Around noon, I made another difficult decision. I called Madison, for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. The phone rang several times. Then she answered. What? No greeting, no warmth, just exhaustion. The sound of her voice startled me. She sounded tired, much more tired than usual. Madison. A pause. What do you want? I ignored the hostility. I need to ask something. I'm busy. Is Ethan okay? Silence. Long silence. Then, why wouldn't he be? The answer came too quickly, too defensively. My concern immediately grew. His teacher called me. Nothing. She said he's been missing school. More silence. Then a sharp exhale. That's none of your business. The response hurt, but it also told me something. If everything were fine, she wouldn't react that way. Madison. What? I'm not calling to fight. Could have fooled me. I forced myself to remain calm. I'm worried about Ethan. For a moment, I thought she might hang up. Instead, her voice suddenly changed. Not softer, just weaker, as if she were tired of carrying something heavy. We're handling it. The statement sounded rehearsed, like something repeated many times. Are you? Another silence. Then I heard something unexpected. Crying. Very quiet crying. At first, I thought I imagined it. Then, it became unmistakable. Madison was crying. My heart broke instantly. No matter what had happened between us, hearing my daughter cry still affected me. Always would. Madison? She didn't answer. What's going on? Nothing. Only breathing. Then finally, you wouldn't understand. The statement sounded less angry than defeated. Try me. Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was trembling. Everything is falling apart. The words stunned me. because they weren't defensive. They were honest. For the first time in months, I heard honesty. I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" No answer. Then suddenly another voice appeared in the background. "Brandon." I couldn't hear the exact words, only the tone. Sharp, demanding, controlling. A moment later, Madison's voice changed again. The vulnerability disappeared instantly. "I have to go." "Wait." The line disconnected. I stared at the phone. Something was wrong, very wrong. And for the first time, I was beginning to believe Madison wasn't simply choosing Brandon over me. She was afraid of him. The realization chilled me. That evening, another unexpected development occurred. My phone rang again. Madison. This time I answered immediately. "Hello?" For several seconds, she didn't speak. Then she whispered, "Mom?" The word hit me harder than I expected. Not Katrina, not a formal greeting. Mom. The first time in months. "Yes." Her breathing sounded uneven, as if she had been crying, or running, or both. Then she said something that changed everything. "I need to tell you something." My pulse quickened. "What is it?" Another pause. Then, "Brandon didn't want Ethan spending time with you." I closed my eyes. Not because I was surprised, because hearing it confirmed hurt more than suspecting it. "What do you mean?" "He said you were trying to control us." I remained silent. "He said if Ethan stayed close to you, you'd eventually turn him against us." The words sounded ridiculous, yet somehow familiar. A story repeated often enough eventually begins sounding true, even to the person hearing it. I listened carefully. Then Madison whispered something else, something that explained months of confusion. "I didn't want to stop you from seeing Ethan." My heart stopped. "What?" The words barely escaped my mouth. She began crying. Real crying, not controlled tears, not manipulation. Pain. Raw pain. "He kept pushing." The room felt suddenly smaller. "He kept saying you were trying to buy influence." Every accusation, every boundary, every confrontation suddenly looked different. Not erased, but different. Then came the final revelation. The one that changed everything. "He said if I didn't cut you off, he'd leave." I stared into space, unable to speak, unable to think, unable to process. Because in one sentence, years of manipulation became visible. Brandon hadn't merely disliked me. He had isolated Madison, gradually, carefully, systematically, and now the entire structure was collapsing. "Mom!" Her voice shook. "Something is very wrong." Tears filled my eyes, because at that moment I realized something important. My daughter wasn't calling to ask for money. She wasn't calling to argue. She wasn't calling to defend herself. She was calling because she was scared. And for the first time in a very long time, she was reaching for me instead of pushing me away. For several seconds after Madison said, "Something is very wrong," neither of us spoke. I simply sat there holding the phone, listening to my daughter cry, listening to the pain she had spent months trying to hide. And despite everything that had happened, despite the humiliation, the accusations, the distance, one truth remained unchanged. She was still my daughter. I still loved her. "Maddie," I said softly. The childhood nickname slipped out before I could stop it. For a moment, neither of us acknowledged it. Then I heard her sob. The sound broke my heart. "When can I see you?" I asked. There was hesitation. Then, "Tomorrow." "Okay, he'll be at work." I immediately understood who she meant, Brandon. "We'll talk then." The next afternoon, I drove to Madison's house for the first time since Ethan's birthday. The entire drive felt surreal. A few months earlier, I would have been excited to visit.
Now I felt as though I were driving toward a battlefield. When I arrived, Madison opened the door almost immediately. I barely recognized her. The woman standing in front of me looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, shoulders tense, face pale, like someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Maybe she hadn't. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then something happened neither of us expected. She stepped forward and hugged me, and immediately began crying. Not polite tears, not controlled tears. The kind of tears people cry when they can no longer carry the weight alone. I held her. The same way I had held her when she was a child. The same way I had held her after her first heartbreak. The same way I had held her after Michael died. Some instincts never disappear. Eventually, we sat at the kitchen table. The house felt strangely quiet. Too quiet. As though everyone inside had been walking on eggshells for months. Madison wiped her eyes. I don't even know where to start. Start anywhere. She stared down at her hands. Then the truth finally began emerging. Piece by piece, slowly, painfully. At first it wasn't bad. I listened. When Brandon got promoted, everything changed. That matched what I had already suspected. He became obsessed with appearances. She laughed bitterly. A bigger house. A nicer car. Better schools. Better clothes. Better friends. Everything had to look successful. Even when it wasn't. I nodded. She continued. At first, I thought it was normal. Lots of people want nice things. But eventually, it became impossible. Her voice cracked. No matter how much we had, it wasn't enough. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Because I already knew where this was going. Debt. More debt. And then even more debt. Madison looked up. Mom. I waited. We were drowning. The words hung heavily in the room. How bad? She laughed once, a broken laugh. Much worse than you think. Then she began explaining. The credit cards, the loans, the refinancing, the secret borrowing, the constant promises that Brandon would fix everything. Each story sounded worse than the last. And every time she questioned him, he had an explanation. Always an explanation. Never a solution. Then came the casino. I showed her the photograph Olivia had sent. The moment she saw it, her face lost all color. You knew? She stared at the picture. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Finally, I suspected. The answer hurt, but it also explained a lot. What did he tell you? Business dinners. I closed my eyes. Of course, business dinners. The oldest lie in the book. Madison looked defeated. I wanted to believe him. That sentence revealed everything. Not ignorance, hope. She had chosen hope over reality. Many people do, especially when reality is terrifying. Then I showed her the financial records. The transfers. The account. The unexplained movements. David had organized everything neatly. Easy to follow. Easy to understand. As Madison read through the documents, tears filled her eyes again. Oh my God! The whisper barely escaped her lips. What? She pointed to one transaction, then another, then another. Her hands began shaking. He used my accounts. I felt my stomach drop, because hearing David suspect it was one thing, hearing Madison confirm it was another. He had access, she nodded, after we got married. The room fell silent. Years of trust, years of access, years of opportunity. Then came the worst part. He opened things without telling me. My chest tightened. How many? She shook her head slowly. I don't even know. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then the front door opened. The sound startled both of us. Madison froze. My heart immediately accelerated. A second later, Brandon walked into the kitchen, and the expression on his face told me everything. Shock.
followed immediately by anger. Katrina. I remained seated. Brandon. His eyes moved between the documents, the photographs, Madison, and me. The realization hit him instantly. He knew. He knew the truth was finally out. What is this? Madison stood. For the first time since I arrived, her posture changed. No fear, no hesitation, no submission, just determination. We need to talk. Brandon's jaw tightened. What did she tell you? Madison laughed bitterly. That's your first question. He ignored it. What did she show you? I said nothing. This wasn't my battle anymore. It was hers. And for the first time, Madison seemed ready to fight it. She held up the casino photograph. His face changed immediately. Only for a second, but long enough to reveal guilt. I can explain. Of course he could. People like Brandon always have explanations. The problem was that explanations stop working when evidence appears. Madison dropped the photograph onto the table. Can you explain this account too? Silence. Can you explain the loans? More silence. Can you explain using my information? The silence became unbearable. Then Brandon finally snapped. Not physically, emotionally. The charming mask disappeared. The polite husband vanished. The careful image collapsed. And what remained was anger. Raw anger. You think she's helping you? He pointed directly at me. There it is. The blame. Exactly where I expected it. Madison didn't even flinch. No. Her voice was calm, cold, dangerously calm. I think you're lying. The room went silent. For a moment, Brandon seemed genuinely stunned. Perhaps because she had never spoken to him that way before. Then she delivered the sentence that ended everything. I'm done protecting you. His face went pale, not angry, afraid, because he finally understood. The secret wasn't hidden anymore. The person covering for him was gone, and without her, the entire structure collapsed. I watched my daughter standing there, stronger than she had looked in years, more honest, more certain. And for the first time since Ethan's birthday, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Pride. Because the little girl I raised was finally fighting for herself. The confrontation was far from over. The consequences were still coming. But one thing had become crystal clear. Brandon Parker's lies were no longer controlling the story. The truth was, and the truth had only just begun speaking. The week after the confrontation felt like living inside the aftermath of a storm. The destruction had already happened. The shouting had ended. The secrets had been exposed. Now everyone had to face the consequences, and consequences, unlike arguments, cannot be negotiated away. 3 days after Brandon was confronted with the financial records, he moved out of the house. Not voluntarily, not gracefully, and certainly not happily. According to Madison, the final argument lasted nearly 6 hours. 6 hours of accusations, excuses, denials, promises, and eventually admissions. Far more admissions than either of us expected. By the end of it, even, Brandon seemed exhausted by his own lies. The gambling debts were real. The hidden loans were real. The unauthorized accounts were real. The money transfers were real. The deception stretched back years. That was perhaps the hardest part for Madison to accept. Not the existence of the lies, the duration of them. Because every anniversary, every vacation, every smiling family photograph, every social media post had existed alongside a secret life she never fully saw, or perhaps never wanted to see. Either way, reality had finally arrived, and reality is often brutal. A week later, Madison called and asked if we could meet, not at her house, not at mine, a small coffee shop halfway between us. I agreed. When I arrived, she was already sitting at a corner table. A cup of coffee sat untouched in front of her. She looked different, still tired, still emotionally drained, but lighter somehow, like someone who had finally stopped carrying a weight that wasn't hers. For several moments, we simply looked at each other. There was so much history between us, so much pain, so much love, and so much damage. Neither of us knew where to begin. Finally, Madison spoke. "I'm sorry." The words were quiet, simple, unpolished, which made them feel real. I remained silent. Not because I wanted to punish her, because I wanted to hear the rest. Tears filled her eyes. I was wrong. The tears in her voice almost broke me. I was so focused on proving I wasn't dependent on you that I stopped seeing what was actually happening. I nodded slowly. She looked down at her hands. I kept thinking Brandon was helping me become independent. A bitter laugh escaped her. He was actually making me more dependent than anyone ever has. The irony hurt, because it was true. For years, she had accused me of control, while the person truly controlling her stood beside her every day. I reached for my coffee, not because I needed it, because I needed a moment. Then I finally spoke. I wasn't perfect either. She looked surprised. I continued. I should have set boundaries years ago. She stared at me. I should have said no sometimes. The tears returned. I don't blame you. I blame myself for some of it, and I meant it, not all of it. Brandon was responsible for his choices. Madison was responsible for hers. But I also had responsibility. Love without boundaries had helped create the environment where entitlement could grow. That truth wasn't comfortable, but it was real. For nearly an hour, we talked honestly, perhaps for the first time in years. No defensiveness, no manipulation, no pretending, just truth. And truth, while painful, can also be healing. Then the conversation shifted to the future. What happens now? Madison asked. I had been expecting the question. For weeks I had thought carefully about the answer, and the answer wasn't what she expected. I'm not restarting the payments. She blinked, then slowly nodded. I know. No argument, no anger, no guilt, just acceptance. I continued. I love you. Tears appeared again. I know. I'll help when there's a genuine emergency. She nodded. But I'm not financing your life anymore. More nodding. No resistance, because deep down, she already understood. I leaned forward. Do you know why? She swallowed hard. Because I need to learn. I smiled sadly. Exactly. For years, I had protected her from consequences. Now she needed the opportunity to become stronger than the protection. It wouldn't be easy, but growth rarely is. Over the next several months, Madison began rebuilding her life. Slowly, painfully, but honestly. She sold the luxury SUV, downsized several expenses, met with financial counselors, took a second job managing social media for a local business. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Every paycheck represented independence, real independence, not the version Brandon had promised. The version she earned herself. Meanwhile, Ethan began changing too. The fear that had shadowed him started fading. According to his teacher, he smiled more, participated more, laughed more. Those updates meant everything to me, even though I still hadn't fully re-entered his life. That part surprised many people. Some expected immediate reconciliation, a dramatic reunion, a movie-style ending. Real life doesn't work that way. Trust rebuilds slowly, especially when it has been broken deeply. One Saturday afternoon, Madison invited me to lunch. Just the two of us. Halfway through the meal, she looked up. Can I ask something? Of course. Her eyes filled with tears. Again. But these were different tears, Not fear, not shame, gratitude. Why did you help me so much all those years? The question caught me off guard. I thought about it for a moment, then answered honestly. Because you're my daughter. She began crying. I smiled gently. That answer hasn't changed. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Then she whispered, I don't deserve you. I shook my head immediately. No. What? You don't need to deserve love. The tears spilled freely now. You just need to learn how to respect it. She nodded slowly, as if the lesson were finally settling into place. Because that was the heart of everything. Not money, not mortgages, not gambling, not social media. Respect. Love without respect becomes entitlement. Support without respect becomes expectation. Family without respect eventually becomes resentment. And all three had nearly destroyed us. Before we left the restaurant, Madison said something that meant more to me than any apology. Not because it was dramatic, because it was sincere. I'm not asking for another chance because I need money. I looked at her. She smiled through tears. I'm asking because I miss my mom. For the first time in a very long while, I felt hope. Real hope. Not hope built on denial. Not hope built on pretending. Hope built on truth. The kind that survives storms. The kind that grows after destruction. And although healing was far from complete, I finally believed something I hadn't believed in months. Our family might actually survive this. 8 months later, I found myself standing in the middle of a small community park on a cool autumn afternoon. The trees had begun changing colors. Orange, gold, deep red. Leaves drifted through the air with every gentle breeze. It was the kind of day Michael would have loved. The kind of day that reminds you life keeps moving forward even after the hardest seasons. I stood near a bench watching children play across an open field. Families laughed together. Parents pushed strollers. Dogs chased tennis balls. Ordinary moments. Beautiful moments. And for the first time in a very long while, my heart felt peaceful. Not perfect. Not untouched by the past. But peaceful. A lot had happened in 8 months. Some changes had been painful. Others had been healing. Most had been both. Madison had worked harder than I ever expected. Not because I demanded it, because she chose to. She met with financial counselors regularly. She created a budget. She sold things she no longer needed. She learned how to live within her means. Most importantly, she stopped measuring success by appearances. That lesson alone changed her life. The woman who once worried about luxury vehicles and social media images now worried about stability, honesty, and creating a healthy home for Ethan. I was proud of her. Not because she became perfect, because she became accountable. There is a difference. Brandon, meanwhile, faded almost entirely from our daily lives. The legal and financial consequences of his actions continued long after he left. Several debts had to be untangled. Multiple accounts required investigation. Lawyers became involved. Paperwork seemed endless, but none of that was my story anymore. My focus remained where it had always belonged. Family, real family, the kind built on trust rather than appearances. And that trust had been rebuilding slowly, very slowly. The first time I saw Ethan again, after everything happened, I cried before he even reached me. It happened 4 months earlier. Madison had arranged a visit at a public park. Nothing dramatic, nothing complicated, just a simple afternoon together. I remember sitting on a bench waiting, my hands shaking, my stomach twisting with nervousness. Then I saw him, running, the exact same way he always had. Full speed, no hesitation, no uncertainty, straight toward me. Grandma Cat? I barely had time to stand before he collided with me. I wrapped my arms around him and held him tightly. For several seconds, neither of us said anything. We simply hugged.
The way family does when words aren't enough.
Eventually, he pulled back and smiled. A real smile. The kind I hadn't seen in far too long. I missed you. Those 3 words healed something inside me. Not completely, but enough. Enough to remind me why I had fought so hard to protect him. Enough to remind me why boundaries sometimes matter. Enough to remind me why love sometimes requires difficult choices. Since then, our relationship had slowly returned. Not exactly the way it was before. Different. Healthier. Stronger. Now when Ethan visited, nobody treated the relationship like a transaction. Nobody counted gifts. Nobody discussed money. Nobody questioned motives. We simply spent time together, the way families are supposed to, the way we should have all along. A burst of laughter pulled me back to the present. I looked up, and there he was, running across the park toward me once again. A little taller now, a little older, but still my Ethan. "Grandma Cat," I laughed, opened my arms, and caught him as he crashed into me. Some things never change, thankfully. Behind him, Madison walked toward us carrying a picnic basket. She smiled when she saw us, not the forced smile from social media, not the guarded smile from difficult conversations, a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes, one that reflected peace. She sat beside me on the bench. For a few moments, we simply watched Ethan playing nearby. The silence felt comfortable, not awkward, not tense. Comfortable, the kind of silence healthy families share. Then Madison reached into her bag. "I almost forgot." "What?" "Ethan made something for you." I looked toward Ethan. He immediately grinned, a mischievous grin, the kind that suggested he had been keeping a secret. Madison handed me a large folded piece of paper, carefully, as though it were something valuable. I opened it slowly. Inside was a drawing, a simple drawing, the kind only a child can create. There were 3 figures standing together, a little boy, a woman, an older woman. Above them was a bright yellow sun, a blue sky, and a huge, smiling face on every person. I smiled immediately. Then I noticed the words written across the top. Large letters, uneven letters, childish letters, but perfectly clear. "Grandma Cat never left." The world seemed to stop. I stared at the drawing, unable to speak, unable to breathe, unable to stop the tears filling my eyes. Because in one simple sentence, an 8-year-old child had summarized everything, every argument, every misunderstanding, every painful decision, every sacrifice, every act of love. He had understood the one thing that mattered most. I hadn't left, even when I stopped the money, even when I stepped back, even when the relationship broke apart. I never stopped loving him, and somehow, despite everything, he knew it. I looked up at Ethan. He suddenly looked nervous. "Do you like it?" The question nearly broke me. I pulled him into another hug. "I love it." His smile returned instantly, the biggest smile in the world. Madison wiped tears from her eyes. I noticed. She noticed me noticing. Then she laughed softly. "He's right, you know." I looked at her. "You never left." The emotion in her voice was unmistakable. Neither of us needed to say more, because we both understood. The hardest lesson of my life wasn't learning how to say no. It wasn't cutting off financial support. It wasn't exposing Brandon's lies. The hardest lesson was understanding that helping someone isn't always the same as loving them. Sometimes love means stepping back. Sometimes love means allowing consequences. Sometimes love means refusing to rescue someone from choices they need to face. And sometimes, The most loving thing a parent can do is establish a boundary, not out of anger, not out of punishment, but out of hope. Hope that the people you love can become stronger than the mistakes they made. As the sun began setting, Ethan climbed onto the bench between us. One arm around me, one arm around Madison. 3 generations, together again. Not perfect, not unchanged, but together. And for the first time in a very long while, that was more than enough. If there's one lesson this experience taught me, it's that love and sacrifice are not the same thing. For many years, I believed loving my daughter meant solving every problem she faced. Whenever she struggled, I stepped in. Whenever she fell, I tried to catch her before she hit the ground. I convinced myself that helping was always the right thing to do. But eventually, I learned something difficult. When support has no boundaries, it can slowly become expectation. When expectation grows unchecked, gratitude disappears. And when gratitude disappears, relationships begin to suffer. Setting boundaries does not mean you love someone less. In many cases, it means you love them enough to stop enabling the things that are hurting them. I also learned that manipulation often hides behind very convincing stories. Sometimes, the loudest person in the room isn't the most honest. Sometimes, the person creating division is the same person pretending to protect the family. Most importantly, I learned that genuine love survives difficult seasons. Money can disappear. Trust can be damaged. Relationships can become strained. But real love continues showing up, quietly, consistently, patiently, even when it's painful. If you're watching this and you're struggling with a difficult family relationship, I hope you remember this. You can love someone deeply and still say no. You can forgive someone and still require accountability. And you can set healthy boundaries without abandoning the people you care about. Sometimes, the strongest form of love is refusing to let a harmful situation continue. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you loved? What would you have done if you were in my position? Please leave a comment below and share your experience. I read as many comments as I can, and your stories often help others who may be facing similar challenges. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional family stories. And before you go, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always love seeing how far these stories travel.